for the country to return to a normal life. That didn't happen. It really fell on deaf ear. It maybe even invigorated the resolve of these protesters to remain on the square. So far we haven't heard anything. I know that some of the checkpoints have been pushed further inside towards the square to allow the flow of cars around the Liberation Square and the rest of Cairo to continue as normal as possible, because you have to understand that Liberation Square is really the heart of Cairo, and on a normal day this place would be completely jammed.
And what about these efforts by the government to push people into going back to work, into injecting a sort of sense of normalcy back into Egyptian society? Is any of that working?
Well, certainly there will be people who are welcoming the fact that banks have reopened, even though they're opening only for 3 hours. The government is monitoring very closely that, because it also will have an impact on the economy, on the Egyptian pound that has already fallen since all this started. But on another side, I think it is also a way to test the Egyptian people, those who are outside the Liberation Square, and everybody here is aware of it. If you speak to the sort of organizers of these protests, they know that today is a crucial day to win the hearts and minds of those who are still on the outskirts, those who are still looking at what are these protests all about, or those who have been suffering because of the economic stalemate in the country and who don't really know in which direction to go. So certainly efforts on both sides today, and I think it's also going to be a big test for security reasons, because it is the first day since all this started that people are going back on the streets to try to go about their normal lives. And this is when you're going to have really a friction between the pro-democracy protesters and just the normal people who are trying to go about with their lives. It's just a big test for all sides.
And of course, today we're seeing talks between the Muslim Brotherhood and Vice President Suleiman. I mean, these are really historic talks because the Muslim Brotherhood has been banned for so long. But what do you think is going to be on the agenda?
I think that these are talks about how to go about what to do next. I'm sorry, I just had to move away from something. These are talks about what to do next here in the country. I think the Muslim Brotherhood is trying to also get its voice heard at this stage. Certainly a huge significance here. As you said, there have been no talks, or maybe secret talks we don't know about, in the past between the two, the government and the Muslim Brotherhood, but to actually see a delegation go to the Vice President openly and declare is a huge symbol. Now, they're going to gauge, obviously, the sincerity of the government. They want to what is the government really prepared to do. They want to talk face to face. But there is a problem here also, because the Muslim Brotherhood itself last night said that they met among other opposition parties like the WAF, the Tagama, and some of these new movements that are calling for reform. And I think there's a stalemate among the opposition parties on what to do with President Mubarak and what is the next step. Some would say, well, let's keep him for his 7 months. Some would say, no, he has to leave now because we don't trust him. Some would say, let's have Omar Suleiman lead the country in the transitional period. The Muslim Brotherhood has indicated that it would rather have the head of the Constitutional Court, which according to Egypt's constitution, is the third person who could take power if the Speaker of the Parliament is ousted and if the President is not capable of leading the country. And I think they have indicated, at least some quarters of the Muslim Brotherhood, that they would like that as a solution. So certainly among the opposition, also a sort of a question on how to go next, and that is something they really need to solve quickly if they want talks with the government to go ahead.
We're just looking at close-up pictures of Tahrir Square, Liberation Square in Cairo. Clearly a lot of people there, a lot of people waving flags, a lot of people coming in. Are you getting the sense that the momentum is continuing? Is there still the same steely determination and sense of purpose there that we saw right at the beginning of these protests?
this is something that is very difficult to gauge, actually. There is certainly a momentum. It's still there. Even if you speak to the pro-democracy protesters themselves, their opinion changes, I would say, every 2-3 hours, depending on who came into the square, what happened on the outside, what move did the government take. So it is very difficult to gauge. Yesterday, there were people, certainly not as much as today. Maybe it was the bad weather. It was raining. Today, there are more people, and probably at the moment they do feel upbeat, because last night there was a worry that now that the country is going to normal, people will go to the banks, people will go to the shops, and maybe people will try to return to their jobs. So certainly, at the moment, they feel upbeat. Maybe in the afternoon they will feel differently. This is something that keeps on changing all the time here.
OK, we'll leave you there for the moment among the crowds on Tahrir Square. Our correspondent there talking about numbers of people coming into the square, where in the next hour we're expecting prayers to begin in the name of people who've died during these 13 days of protests. The government trying to inject a sense of normalcy into the day, trying to get people to go back to normal, reopening banks and businesses for a short while. Andrew Simmons joins us now from Cairo. Andrew, I mean, how is that going? Banks and businesses reopening, but for a very short time.
Yeah, limited openings and limited availability both in Cairo and Alexandria. Shuli, let me just take you across the Nile to give you the sort of images you're seeing today, some semblance of normality returning. A solemn day in Liberation Square, but as you look along Qasr El Nil Bridge, the bridge where the main entrance for the demonstrations has been, you will see at the end of this shot the queues still pouring in to the square. The square is behind what you'll probably see there, a blue barricade the protesters have put up. And of course, this a very, very solemn occasion for the church in terms of remembering the dead, the martyrs. And while this is going on, as you rightly point out, the banks are reopening in a limited way for the first time. The stock market still closed, and it will take about at least 48 hours before any notice is given the stock markets will reopen. And you have to remember that the estimate at losses to the economy are put at around $310 million a day. So this is now turning from a battle on the streets to a battle of hearts and minds, and the practicalities are overwhelming, because people are now tending to think, a large number of people we've spoken to are tending to think now that the practicalities have to cut in, and there has to be some level of real understanding of their hardship, and people need to return to work. They need to get back to work, get back to normal. Now, of course, the government strategy is, the regime is trying to portray this as normality, trying to use this as a big kettle. The Liberation Square is a big kettle. They let the steam out, and they bring people back into some semblance of normality, and therefore move it out. Now, of course, the resolve of the people is strong. The people of the square is immensely strong, but it's really at a pivotal point now. There is a real concern about how this momentum will last, how it will actually keep together. Now back to the studio.
Andrew, thanks very much indeed for that. Let's go back to the scenes in Tahrir Square in Cairo, where you can see thousands of people preparing for prayers. Let's just listen in to the kind of sounds we're hearing and the atmosphere we're seeing in this heart of the battle for Egypt. pictures coming out of Cairo's Tahrir Square, where noon prayers have started. These prayers being dedicated to the so-called martyrs, as they're calling them, the people who died during the past 13 days of protest. It's worth mentioning that those numbers are in dispute. The Egyptian government saying 11 people have died since these protests began on January the 25th. 5,000 people have been injured. Other news agencies